Good morning. My name is Mansour Ismaila, and I welcome you to the launch of my TikTok on geopolitics, essentially. So I have called it Geo Musings by Mansour, and that is essentially what we'll be doing here. We will be musing, we will be, you know, reflecting, we will be analyzing, we will be explaining, we will be helping us contextualize, essentially help bring out the meaning of things, help distill, you know, the avalanche of news that is out there about geopolitical conflict, about life, about living, about how global conflict, about how conflict between superpowers and middle powers and zero powers essentially distill down into our life and living, how it affects us day to day, and what we can do to cope, to mitigate these challenges and circumstances. And I am starting this TikTok. I am starting this platform at a very epochal time in the history of mankind, when quite some interesting countries are at each other's throats, trying to obliterate, one another, in the language of President Trump of the United States of America. It's primarily, the U.S. and Israel are the belligerents on one side, while Iran is a major belligerent on the other side. However, as things have evolved since Saturday, when the war started at circa 10:30 a.m. Nigerian time, it's clear that some other countries are starting to align, on either side. But what exactly we are talking about today is the concept of the Discombobulator. It's a bit difficult to pronounce. I tell my wife that when I want to pronounce that word, I'm a natural stammerer. So because of that, it's a bit difficult for me to pronounce that word at a single go. So what I simply do is that I add a few codes. So it's more convenient for me to pronounce this Discombobulator. Essentially the idea behind what President Trump called the Discombobulator is the weapon system that the United States of America successfully used in its operation to capture. Some will call it arrest. According to the authorities, they believe that President Maduro, or former President Maduro, as you will call him, is guilty of drug-related charges and some other issues like that. But that weapon system that President Trump called the Discombobulator, is actually what we'll be discussing about, starting with this, to start this platform on geopolitics, on geomuseums with Mansour. Now, what President Trump called the Discombobulator, the first time I came across something that looked like that was a few years ago, and it first came out as what was called the Havana Syndrome. What is the Havana Syndrome? The Havana Syndrome is a particular set of health challenges, health accidents or health emergencies, you could say, that some American and Western diplomats and intelligence agencies were exposed to in some particular countries. First of them was Cuba, Havana, the U.S. consulate in Havana. The second was Russia, and I think some other European countries. So what would happen was that those diplomats and intelligence agents will visit those countries, will visit the embassies and the consulates in those countries, and they will come down with strange symptoms that seems to destabilize them. Symptoms such as sudden severe headache, tinnitus. Tinnitus is when it feels as if something is ringing in your ears. Vomiting, nausea, sudden unusual fatigue, diarrhea, cramps, and some other. Essentially, it looked as if something they did not see, without any obvious noxious stimuli. Something did not attack them, something did not hit them in the face. There's no history of trauma, you just start feeling as if they've gone through like a train wreck in the air. Essentially, that was the first time something like that came out. Spotted out into the media. Havana syndrome. That was the first name it was given. So ever since then, I have been following, the trajectory, of the Havana, syndrome until it was D-Day and D-time in Caracas in Venezuela, and then after the attack, after the capture and the arrest of President what do you call it, President Maduro, President Trump came up on here on the media and he was practically bragging with what he now gave the name Discombobulator. The dictionary meaning of discombobulation essentially means something that takes you out of commission, something that knocks you out. You can't do anything anymore. Now, the presidential guards of the then President Maduro, who happened to be Cuban, they were essentially shredded. They were massacred. In fact, Venezuela sent back then Vice President, the now President Rodriguez of Venezuela, actually sent back 80 dead Cuban, citizens who were presidential guards of President Maduro back to Havana, to the government of Cuba. So, according to President Trump, it was that so-called discombobulator that the American, special forces used to first disorient and take out those presidential guards in Havana. In Caracas, when they were going to take it and pick up a President Maduro. So that weapon, that so-called discombobulator of President Trump, first and foremost, destabilized, gave them all those symptoms I listed. Those presidential guards and the other Venezuelan security agencies that were protecting President Maduro actually experienced those symptoms, were taken out of commission, and then the Americans had an easy pass to go on and pick up a President Maduro. Now, that was how the discombobulator came up. If I will domesticate the concept of the discombobulator, I would say that the discombobulator will be a biological version of what we call the EMP, electromagnetic pulse. For those of us who are conversant with Hollywood, and for those of us who are particularly adept at physics, electronics, and concepts like that, you will remember that essentially the EMP, the electromagnetic pulse, is a kind of electric bomb. A bomb that does not explode, a bomb that does not blow things up, a bomb that does not. It is a bomb that essentially fries everything around it that is electrical. Your circuits, your TVs will stop working, your gas stop, your turbines will stop working, anything electrical about your car will stop working, any and everything electric, all your power grids, all your transformers, all your electrical installations, all your data centers, any and everything. If somebody, puts pressure on an EMP, in an environment, within the radius around which the EMP is active, everything first and foremost goes dark. Forget your transformer, forget your power grids, forget your solar power installations, forget your turbines, forget any and everything that works by electricity. The EMP essentially takes it out. Do you understand? So now the electromagnetic pulse, bomb, the EMP bomb, is essentially the electric version of what President Trump called the discombobulator. While the so-called President Trump's discombobulator is the biological versions, the discombobulator takes out humans. They start vomiting, they start going double, they start getting dizzy, they start, essentially it takes it out. They stop functioning as humans, and whoever brought in that weapon essentially is able to do any and everything he can with them and whoever is around them. Now, my thesis, my question that will inform the next video, the next episode of this platform of my Geo Musings by Mansour Start. Is Iran, or has Iran started the process of discombobulating the American military in the Middle East? That is the question. Is Iran discombobulating the Americans in the Middle East? That is the question.